This movie tore me so much it turned my hair black. Hello, I'm Multiprometheus 1, and welcome to another episode of Good or Bad, where I take a look at popular films and try to figure out whether or not they deserve such popularity. And yes, today we will be talking about Jaws. That's right, Jaws. This 1975 B-movie combined elements of horror and action-adventure in a tale about a small-town police chief investigating a series of shark attacks on the local beaches and teaming up with an oceanographer and a big-game sport fisherman to take it down. It was the first summer blockbuster. It launched the career of Steven Spielberg into directing stardom, and it made a whole generation afraid to go into the water. And it had crappy sequels. And I just saw it for the first time. Yeah, the first time. So I have a fresh opinion on it, without any nostalgia goggles or fond childhood memories, and I have to say, I'm not sure it deserves all the praise it gets. I want to love it, but for some reason I'm really having a hard time doing so. So let's dive right in and see whether or not it truly is safe to go into the water. This is Jaws. So the film begins with a bunch of ruffian, rapscallion hooligans hanging out by the beach. This one guy and girl start to hit it off, and they decide to go swimming, but the guy turns out to be so drunk he passes out before he even gets in the water. And here's Sharky. Okay, before I move on, I just want to make one thing perfectly clear. Throughout this entire video, I will be referring to the shark simply as the shark, or the occasional Sharky. Why, you may ask? Because the shark's name is not Jaws! Dear Lord in heaven, it gets so annoying when everyone, literally everyone, calls the shark Jaws as if it's its name. Hey dude, remember the scene when Jaws eats that little kid? The part where they kill Jaws is amazing. Jaws is like one of my favorite movie monsters ever. What the hell is wrong with you people? Jaws is the title of the movie, not the shark's name. The shark doesn't have a name. It's a shark. I know I sound like I'm being petty, but seriously, saying the shark's name is Jaws just because that's the title of the movie is like saying the guy in the hockey mask's name is Friday the 13th, or saying the guy in the William Shatner mask's name is Halloween, or saying the guy who defeats the Empire's name is Star Wars. It's stupid. It's so stupid. And it is for that reason why I will not, absolutely will not, be referring to the shark as Jaws at any point in this video. This opening is, I guess, effective enough, but it feels lacking a little bit. I feel like there's not enough build-up. It just kind of throws these two characters who are pretty bland even as characters who are only there to die in the opening scene go, and he suddenly passes out of nowhere while she suddenly gets eaten by a shark. Plus, there's a glaring technical mistake in this scene. The time of morning changes between each shot, literally. When we see the girl getting attacked, it's already dawn. But when we see the guy get passed out on the beach, the sun is just starting to rise. And it goes back and forth like this for the entire scene. I get that this movie had a budget on the lower end of the spectrum for its time, but come on, this is a film student type mistake. When you're making a film about a killer creature, the opening scene is one of the most crucial things. So the fact that the opening scene for this film really isn't that great made me really concerned about the film to follow. We then see a pretty clever and effective scene transition as we're introduced to Chief Brody, his wife, then him. A little disorienting at first, but in hindsight there's nothing really wrong with it. Brody is the chief of police in the small island town of Amity, off the coast of Massachusetts. Yeah, I know it's implied to be New York, but it's actually Massachusetts. He's called in to take a look at the body of the girl that got attacked the night before. Wow, it was nice of the shark to leave the remains there for them to find. Seriously, they couldn't have washed up naturally that far up the beach even with the tide. He gets a call from the medical examiner telling him the cause of death was likely a shark attack. He immediately sets to work getting the beaches closed. I actually really like the fact that they have to go buy supplies to make the beach closed signs because they've never needed them before. It does a great job of conveying the innocence of the town. But the mayor isn't happy he's closing the beach because it'll soon be the 4th of July, and the town's economy depends on the tourism. The whole politician only interested in money thing is a little cliche, But I think this is one of the films that popularized it, so I'm giving it a little bit of a free pass. Plus, it kind of makes sense. Just like people are now saying Walter Peck from Ghostbusters was in the right the whole time, the mayor here does have good intentions for wanting the beaches to remain open. It's a beach town. Without income from tourism during the summer, everyone's on welfare the rest of the year. I give this movie props for giving its human antagonists not evil intentions, just intentions that don't work with the situation. Brody keeps the beaches open, but he can't shake the feeling that something's lurking beneath the surface.
We know all about you, Chief. You're not going to bother at all, do you?
Subtle. But a young boy gets killed, and now it's certain there's a shark going around, and Brody decides to close the beaches. This understandably upsets the town residents. Again, I really like this dilemma. You can really see both sides. You want them to close the beaches so no more people get killed, but you also don't want them to close the beaches because this town's entire economy depends on the summer tourism. You see both sides, which is essential for well-written drama. But one of the biggest problems with this movie is how rushed it is. We're only 20 minutes in and all of this has happened so far. Even the character of Brody seemed like a pretty flat character at first because the plot kicked into maximum overdrive before I got the chance to know him. The pacing of all this is a problem. We're then introduced to Quint, a big game sport fisherman who offers to find the shark and kill it for $10,000. I love this lady's reaction to him scratching his nails on the chalkboard. We then see two fishermen sneaking out at night to try and win a bounty for killing the shark, and this is a really fun scene.
Charlie, swim! Come on, Charlie, swim! Swim, Charlie, come on! To me, boy, come on! Come on, Charlie, swim! To me! Come on, Charlie, keep swimming! Keep swimming, Charlie! Come on, a little more, Charlie!
The next morning, every fisherman in town goes out to kill the shark and win the bounty. And once again, I really like this. All the ways Spielberg and the writers show the innocence of this town are really effective. It's definitely one of the strongest parts of the movie. We're then introduced to the oceanographer they called Hooper. Hooper. He's the best character in this. I'm not kidding, I freaking love this character. He's a nerdy geek, but he's also kind of a badass as well. He's extremely serious, but he's also hilarious.
Then can you tell me if there's a good restaurant or hotel on the island?
You walk straight ahead.
Yeah, they're all gonna die.
All about here.
Brody and the medical examiner show him the remains of the girl from the beginning, and he's confident it was a shark attack. But it seems the shark has been caught as a group of fishermen bring in a carcass. Yeah, I really believe that. That's totally the shark they're looking for. There's an hour and a half left of the movie, and they did it. They caught the shark. Hell, the dummy they used for the shark carcass is so fake looking that when I first saw it, I thought the fishermen were actually trying to pass off a fake shark for a real one. Wait a minute. That was a real shark they used in the scene? Oh. That's the fakest looking real shark I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, but what kind? What kind of shark?
It's a tiger shark.
A what?
What is it with the residents of this town and weird reactions to things? Between this lady's face and the way this guy says,
A what?
I seriously wonder if any of these extras actually took this movie seriously. I mean, it was a B movie for the time, and they probably thought of it as such.
A what?
Oh my goodness. And this brings us to the famous scene of the young son trying to cheer him up by imitating him. It's nothing tear-worthy, but it does have that typical Spielberg charm. Hooper arrives to really not do anything. If you really think about it, Hooper doesn't really have a reason for coming to their house. The movie just needs him to, so they can decide to go cut open the shark and see if it's the right one. Not only is this scene forced, but it's very awkward as well.
Is anyone eating this?
No.
And there's also this.
Martin hates boats.
Again, subtle. Brody and Hooper go through with their plan to cut open the shark, and they don't see the remains of the two victims inside, meaning that this isn't the shark they were looking for.
We gotta find him right now. He's a night feeder.
Yeah, he's a night feeder. That's why every single person he eats in this movie except one he eats during the day. Hooper gets Brody super drunk, so we'll get on the boat, and Now that I think about it, what is even the point of having Brody be afraid of the water? It's not the result of some traumatic experience he had when he was young, he's just afraid of the water. And it has almost no effect on the story. It's just something people verbally mention from time to time and nothing else. Even the climactic scene where he kills the shark isn't played like he's confronting his fear, it's barely acknowledged at all. There's literally no reason in this movie for him to be afraid of the water. It's completely pointless. Hooper goes into the water to check out an abandoned boat and finds a great white shark tooth stuck in, confirming the fact that the shark is still out there. But the owner of the boat gives him a heads up, and he drops the tooth out of fear. They try to convince the mayor to close the beach, but since Hooper dropped the tooth and they don't have any proof, he insists the beach will remain open. And just in time for the 4th of July, hundreds and hundreds of people arrive on the island as Brody and Hooper try to pull together as many extra cops and safety officers as they can. And as the holiday festivities begin, it looks like Sharky's back. Okay, I think I need to start a list.
A what?
But it just turns out to be some kids playing a joke. I will give this scene credit for subtly hinting that it isn't really the shark by not playing the usual music, but I won't give this scene credit for the fact that I thought this was one of Brody's kids for a second. Seriously, almost every young boy in this movie looks exactly the same. I often have no idea whether the kid I'm looking at is Brody's or not, and that really hurts scenes like this. But they can't stay relieved for long as the music begins and the shark eats one guy and injures Brody's son. And in a very refreshing scene, the mayor admits he was wrong and allows Brody to hire Quint to kill the shark. And from here on out, this becomes a very different movie. The first half of this movie is kind of like a horror movie, a killer going around killing people and the main characters having to fight it. But the second half of this movie is kind of like an action-adventure film about 3 guys on a boat trying to kill the shark. And it stays with them the whole rest of the movie. The very next scene of them hiring Quint is the last time you see anyone on the island. The rest of the movie is just Brody, Hooper, and Quint out on a boat in the middle of the ocean trying to kill the shark. This isn't really a problem, it's just odd. The fact that the first half of this movie and the second half of this movie feel like 2 completely different movies it's just odd. And let's talk about Quint too. He's kind of a stereotypical, "Arg, I'm a tough guy sailor, I sail the 7 seas." And while you could make the argument that this is another example of a cliche this film popularized, it doesn't change the fact that he can be annoying at times. While they're setting up the boat and bringing all the equipment on board, I actually thought to myself, great, I'm gonna have to spend the rest of the movie with this guy. I did get a little used to him as time went on, but it doesn't change the fact that he was annoying to begin with. But I love the idea of the character. I love what the character was intended to be. More on that later. So I'm really torn when it comes to this character. I really am. Out on the ocean, the 3 of them don't seem to be getting along as Quint keeps bossing them around and treating them like dumb children. But something seems to be pulling on the line. Okay. That was awesome. Whatever it is breaks off, and this leaves the 3 of them with nothing to do but yell at each other some more. Brody goes to throw some bait in the water and finally comes face to face with Sharky. The whole crew races into action, and once again we're reminded of Brody's fear of the water. And again, it does almost nothing to serve the story. Hell, if he was this afraid of the water, he would have never gotten on the boat in the first place. If you're gonna set the entire second half of your movie on a boat in the middle of the ocean, don't make your main character aquaphobic. And if you're going to, actually have a reason for it in the story. This whole movie would be almost exactly the same if the entire fear of the water thing was completely removed. I seriously don't get why they included it. I really don't. They're able to attach a barrel to the shark with a harpoon so that it can't swim too far under the water and they can keep an eye on it. They do this multiple times throughout the movie, and it does serve as a nice visual symbol of how many times they've tried to kill the thing and how many times they've failed. Legit visual storytelling. And this leads us to what almost everyone can agree is one of the best scenes in the movie. Quint and Hooper, a little drunk, start comparing scars when it turns out that one of Quint's is a removed tattoo for the USS Indianapolis. The Indianapolis was a Navy cruiser in World War II that delivered components for the atomic bomb used in Hiroshima. The ship was hit by 2 Japanese torpedoes and sunk, leaving the survivors in a struggle to survive not only the solitude on the open sea, but sharks as well. Many of those who survived the sinking were later killed by sharks, in what, according to the Smithsonian.com, was the worst shark attack in recorded history. The way this scene starts off so lighthearted and very naturally turns to Quint struggling to hold back tears as he remembers being one of those survivors, combined with Robert Shaw's fantastic performance, make this not only an extremely powerful scene, but one that completely redeems the character in my eyes. For the entire film up to this point, Quint has been a character I really didn't like at all. But this scene makes up for all of it by giving a very believable reason for why he's dedicated his life to killing sharks and why he's such a jerk to everyone. He experienced one of the worst naval disasters in American history firsthand and has to live with it. Very rarely does a movie give me a character I don't like and then completely redeem them later. That's pretty impressive. But everything kicks back into gear when the shark starts playing whack-a-boat.
Up around.
Done.
Everybody up there.
Need the light.
He cut the power? How could he cut the power, man? He's an animal. Everyone springs into action and nothing happens. You had all that build up for a big action scene and you didn't do anything. What was the point of the build up then? Okay, so you had Quint drunkenly try and shoot the shark a few times, but that doesn't go anywhere, so odd. Again, just odd. The next morning, the shark comes back, begging the question of why they even had that little scene a minute ago in the first place. I'm done with that. And Brody finally succumbs to his fear, or at least I think he does, it's not made clear at all, and Quint destroys the radio so they can't call for help. This could be interpreted as Quint succumbing to his obsession to kill the shark, but once again, not made clear at all. They're able to attach the 2 more barrels and eventually attach the shark to the boat. It's common knowledge amongst movie nerds that the animatronic sharks used for this movie barely worked, and Spielberg had to compromise by showing them as little as possible. And this ended up working in the film's favor, because what you don't see is often scarier than what you do. Your imagination fills in the blanks. But here's the problem. In this climax, you see the shark a lot, as in almost every other shot. They show the shark way too much in this scene, and how much the thing doesn't work on set is really obvious. Really, really obvious. It looks almost as fake as the shark in Jaws 4. That's right, I said it. It looks almost as fake as the shark in Jaws 4. I am actually comparing something in the original Jaws to Jaws 4. If they were going to go with the whole don't show the shark very much because it looks ridiculous thing, they should have gone all the way with it, not suddenly start showing the darn thing in every other shot during the final scene. It makes the whole climax feel very out of place with the tone and feel of the rest of the film. The shark starts pulling the boat all over the place and they have to cut it loose. Quint tries to draw it to shallow water, but he, for some reason, again possibly the obsession thing, but it's not made clear at all, pushes the engines too hard, causing them to go kablooey. The boat starts taking on water fast, and it looks like the end has come. They decide to go with the last resort plan, which is for Hooper to go into the cage and try and inject poison into Sharky. But he drops the poison, and now it's up to him to simply stay alive. As ridiculous as the shark looks, this really isn't that bad of a scene. The darkness and non-clarity of the water, the slow speed at which Hooper's able to swim, and how relentless the shark is all make it decently suspenseful. He gets out of the cage and hides in some rocks at the bottom, leaving Quint and Brody to fend for themselves. But the shark decides it's through playing games and literally eats the back of the boat, causing it to sink even faster. And just like that, Quint gets eaten. And then there was one. I do love the idea of Brody being trapped in a tiny wheelhouse while the shark keeps busting in. He's able to get it to go away, though, by throwing an air tank in its mouth, and he climbs the mast to stay above the water. You know, movie, now would be a good time to show him confronting his fear. No? You're not going to do that? You're not going to have it tie into anything? Okay. Again, totally pointless. He fights it off for a minute or two before getting a good clean shot at the air tank, blowing it up and killing it for good. Now, don't get me wrong, Brody's saying, "Smile, you son of a," and then blowing up the shark is pretty awesome, but only in theory. It doesn't feel awesome. And that's probably because there's very little buildup. He just kind of does it. Okay, there is a little buildup, but it's ruined by the fact that he keeps repeating, "Show me the tank," and "blow up" over and over again.
Alright, come on. Show me the tank. Show me the tank. Blow up.
For a director that's so good at visual storytelling, this was a really big missed opportunity. Hooper comes to the surface once he knows it's safe. Brody very awkwardly says he used to hate the water, because, yeah, that really tied into a lot of stuff in the plot, and that's where it ends. Yeah, it just ends there. The wife's story arc? Who cares? The mayor's story arc? Not important. Any hints at all of what the consequences of this will be for the town? Just save it for the sequel. End the movie right after the shark dies. And that was Jaws. It was the first big summer blockbuster. It skyrocketed the careers of Steven Spielberg and John Williams, and it's one of the most famous movies of all time. So, what's the verdict? Well, it has a lot of problems. A lot of problems. I love the ideas and themes presented, but the execution is just all over the place. It's not a masterpiece at all. But if you think about it, it wasn't intended to be. When they made this, they were just making a silly movie about a killer shark. They didn't intend for it to become insanely successful and even get nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. They were just trying to make a silly movie about a killer shark. And when you look at it that way, you start to realize it doesn't really work as a creature feature or an action film, but it works phenomenally well as something else. A slasher film. Really think about it. What is a slasher film? A low-budget flick about a killer that goes around killing, usually supernatural or non-human in some way, a group of characters trying to convince authority figures of the threat and not being believed, and having to take matters into their own hands. And every time they think the killer's dead, he pops back up again. When I start to think of Jaws as a slasher movie, I realize just how good it is. The characters in a slasher movie are usually bland hunks of meat and nothing more, but the characters in this film are really likable and memorable, even the ones you're not supposed to like. The killers in slasher movies are usually something you really have to suspend your disbelief for, but a shark is a very real and realistic threat. Usually the actions of the killer in a slasher film only affect a few kids in a small town or a camp, but the actions of this killer affect an entire community and their way of life, giving the threat a lot more weight to it. Now granted, the movie often accredited with popularizing the slasher movie formula, John Carpenter's Halloween, didn't come out until 3 years later, but I still think this logic applies when considering how to judge this film as a modern 2018 moviegoer. This isn't a great creature feature, and it's not a great action film either, but it's definitely one of the best slasher films of all time. I'm Multiprometheus 1, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Yeah, he's a night feeder. That's why every person he eats in this movie, he eats during the day except one. I burped.